The year is 1997. The era of empire is at its end. Hong Kong, which was a crown colony, is now being returned to Chinese sovereignty. Amidst the march of soldiers is the incredible backdrop of the royal yacht, Britannia, a name which is forever symbolic of Britain's maritime prowess. Like British control over Hong Kong, Britannia too is at the end of the line, for this would be her last deployment. To understand this story, we must go back a bit. Royal yachts have long been symbols of imperial power for the British monarchy. They were used, among other things, to sail around for official state duties. A good example of this was when HMS Royal Sovereign carried King George III during a naval review celebrating the Treaty of Paris in 1814. Where the use of royal yachts really took off was during the reign of Queen Victoria. As Britain's empire continued to sprawl over the surface of the globe, it became increasingly important to have these ships for both a symbolic role as well as a literal one to carry the royal family around and project the nation's image overseas. During her reign, 3 prominent royal yachts were built, all of which would be named Victoria and Albert. The first served for little over a decade starting in the 1840s and mainly transported the royals to and from Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. The second came along in 1855 and she was built to an improved design. This vessel would host important events like the visit of the Ottoman Sultan in 1867. By the late 19th century, Queen Victoria argued that the Russian and German monarchies had newer and more advanced yachts, and in a time when prestige was everything, Britain could not be upstaged in her claim to seaborne supremacy. As such, a third Victoria and Albert would be completed in 1901, just after Queen Victoria's death. Arguably, this vessel would be the most notable of the lot, featuring in major occasions like the fleet reviews of 1935 and 37, where she took centre stage navigating the lines of Royal Navy warships. The intention was that when the 1940s rolled around, a replacement could be constructed, but due to the outbreak of the Second World War, this would be delayed up until the 1950s. King George VI had expressed his desire for a modern vessel that could serve both the royal family and reflect Britain's renewed sense of purpose after the devastation of the Second World War. Plans would be drawn up as early as the late 1940s. However, sadly due to the King's death in 1952, he would not live to see the project completed. Nonetheless, the following year the new Queen launched the vessel, giving her the name Britannia. Britannia, of course, being the national personification of Britain, first coined by the Romans. The selection of this name therefore connected the ship with its nation and the history of Britain's maritime heritage. Even by this point, the writing was beginning to appear on the wall that Britain was on the way out. India had just received independence, and so began the long process of decolonisation. As a result of this, the new yacht had to have a bit more justification than simply the monarch wanted it. This would come in the idea that during wartime, Britannia could be converted into a hospital ship with up to 200 beds on board. Displacing nearly 6,000 tons, Britannia was larger than all her predecessors. She would be homeported in Portsmouth and operated by the Royal Navy. Her maiden voyage came in 1954 when she sailed to Malta to embark the new Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, following their Commonwealth tour. This would mark the beginning of a long and enduring career intertwined with the deconstruction of Britain's empire and the reshaping of Britain's geopolitical position. There are many prefixes which have been used over the years for British shipping. HMS for the Navy, of course, HMHS for naval hospital ships, and in our case, they had HMY, standing for Her Majesty's Yacht. Throughout her decades of service, Britannia would host foreign leaders and dignitaries, take the royal family on holiday cruises, and participate in naval reviews. The Queen herself was very involved in the decorating of the vessel because she understood that she would spend a lot of time on Britannia, whether that was on diplomatic journeys or on personal retreats. The ship's crew, known as the Royal Yachtsmen, were a group of around 220 Royal Navy sailors, chosen for their discipline. Many served aboard for years, forming a close-knit and loyal unit. She also embarked a detachment of Royal Marines. The ship was very much steeped in history, For example, many of her furnishings were directly taken from previous royal yachts which had since been scrapped. Her wheel, for example, was taken from an old racing yacht which was used by King George V. Interestingly, it was planned that in the event of a nuclear war, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh would leave the country on Britannia, where they would be much safer at sea. By this point, the United States had replaced Britain as the world's foremost naval power, and the Royal Navy was increasingly having to adapt to this new status quo. Subsequently, Britannia's purpose was not to be a simple continuation of the past, but rather a shift into the future. She would sail around the world helping to strengthen personal and diplomatic relations between the sovereign and member states of the Commonwealth. In the 1977 Spithead Naval Review, Britannia transported the Queen through the lines of warships as part of the commemoration of the Silver Jubilee. This spectacle was reminiscent of the previous reviews like the one held exactly 4 decades earlier. During the Falklands War in 1982, the concept of Britannia as a hospital ship was quickly exposed as impractical, although some might argue that the idea was only ever floated around in the first place to justify her construction. In her stead, the passenger liner SS Uganda was requisitioned for the role. By the turn of the 90s, questions surrounding her future began to appear. Both the royal household and the Ministry of Defence knew that Britannia would soon need a major refit, one that could cost up to £20 million. Discussions about building a new royal yacht faced strong opposition. Britain was, after all, recovering from economic hardship, and the political climate of the day left little room for what was arguably a sentimental throwback to a bygone age. By the mid-90s, the government had made its decision. There would be no replacement for Britannia. Hong Kong would be returned to Chinese control on the 1st of July, 1997. Britannia, for her part, was tasked with transporting Prince Charles down to attend the ceremony on behalf of the Crown. Undeniably, this was a very symbolic occasion, and after all was said and done, Britannia departed, carrying both the Prince of Wales and Governor Chris Patten. Britannia was escorted out of Hong Kong by HMS Chatham, and in the following days she would integrate into a large task force of warships led by the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious, which was joined by patrol ships of the Royal Navy Hong Kong Squadron. By December of that same year, Britannia was decommissioned in Portsmouth in a ceremony attended by the Queen and other senior royals. The Queen was very fond of the vessel, and her sadness at her decommissioning was plain to see. Being a royal yacht had not saved ships in the past, so it was interesting to see that Britannia was preserved. She is listed as being part of the National Historic Fleet, which is a title given to ships of a profound historic and national significance. She is cared for by the Royal Yacht Britannia Trust in Leith, Scotland, where she attracts over 300,000 visitors a year. Since decommissioning, her aft superstructure has been reconfigured to enhance visitor experience, but all round it is excellent that she has been preserved. You would think that would be the end for Britain's long history of royal yachts, but no. In 2021, Boris Johnson managed to pull the idea out of the closet as part of his Global Britain strategy. This new yacht was intended to be more of a national flagship, hosting trade missions and diplomatic events, rather than a royal yacht which would also operate for the leisure of the royal family. But this was cancelled by Rishi Sunak in 2022 in favour of procuring a multi-role ocean surveillance ship, which we now know as RFA Proteus, which I believe was a better allocation of funding. Do you think Britain needs a national flagship, or is this a relic of the past that should end with Britannia? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.